Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of Scratch My Noodle. I am your host, Jeff Macolino. Thank you for joining us. And joining us today is another special guest, Joe Weatherford. Joe, how are you today?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk with you. So I guess the to get started, well, yeah, I'll kick the ball over to you. I was going to say, let's do this anyways. Tell my audience what you do now. I mean, your backstory is obviously important to get there, though. But tell my audience a little bit about what you do now, and then we'll circle back to it.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I've lived a lot of different lives, but now I work with clients online. I focus a lot on high performers. So typically, I'm working with men, CEOs that are about to be done working these really high stressful jobs, and they're phenomenal in business, and their relationships are suffering. So I do a lot of intimacy work with men, and I also focus a lot on addiction. So that is my specialty. I'm an addiction expert. I speak a lot on addiction. I travel a lot, different conferences advocating for harm reduction approaches and alternative treatments. I am a big proponent of psychedelic therapy. So I work one on one with clients. And then I also am a motivational speaker, and that's my wheelhouse.
Awesome. So yes, we have a lot to talk about. um, but I guess to maybe to frame the rest of the conversation, let's start with your background. Because I was, I guess that's an interesting question. Even I was going to say, to become an addiction expert, I feel like you have to have suffered from it. But I don't know that that's the case with all practitioners, and maybe that's why addiction treatment is not always effective, would be my guess.
Well, it's a great point. I don't believe that you have to have experienced something to be effective in working with it. Thank God, because as a psychologist, you would need to be depressed, bipolar, having affairs, like all the
Good
things all at
point.
once,
Good point.
right? But I do think there's value. And I mean, I'm a professional in the world of addiction, like academically and professionally. So I just happen to wear both hats.
It's a weird so this is a weird conversation, and as you could probably tell from my background, I'm not sober, and I'm uh, so this is a conversation I have with different people about different topics, but regarding addiction, because I have it's tough to classify when, and you probably are qualified to speak on this, when something is an addiction as opposed to just something somebody enjoys doing. Like the example I always go to is people who gamble all the time. If they win, they don't have. I mean, they maybe do have an addiction, but if they're winning, it's not a problem. Like it's I have a friend who gambles excessively, and he wins money. Like he makes a second income off his, and it's like, well, good for you. The guy who's gambling away his mortgage payment and having to get a loan from the mafia to pay off one bookie, that obviously is someone who's down a bad road with addiction. So that's kind of me personally. What alcohol comes into effect. It's like, well, I enjoy it, and I don't have. I mean, I'm sure there are some negative health consequences I haven't encountered yet. But it's like, but I'm not out causing problems. I'm not out. I don't drink and drive. I'm not doing anything that, and this leads to the question of, well, maybe, you just haven't hit a rock bottom yet where you can assess. And I'm like, but what if I never hit a rock bottom? Is it then a so I don't know. Psychologically, I have a hard time getting a good grasp on the the topic of addiction, because I think, and I make jokes about it a lot, about, I refer to myself as a drunk or an alcoholic, and I do it in jest, and I don't mean to diagnose myself with anything, of course.
Yeah.
And that being said, I don't want to make light of what other people deal with on a serious nature. Like, I know a lot of sober people who are like, no, if I have one drink, I will spiral out of control. And I'm like, see, I can have one drink now, and then if I needed to not drink for the next 6 hours or 6 days, whatever. I might want to drink because, well, we won't even dive into that. But anyways, I guess the question is, when does it become when does an addiction become something that needs to be managed, as opposed just, like people who are addicted to exercise? Obviously, you don't want to correct that behavior. I mean, again, I guess there could be a case where you want to correct that too, if they're not giving themselves recovery time or something, and it's actually diminishing their health. Um, so I don't know. I have a hard time in my head, and maybe that's part of my problem. So go ahead. Yeah. What do you?
Yeah, you hit on the two most important pieces. I think one is the negative consequences, and the other is this idea of compulsion. I mean, if we're going to really look at the opposite of addiction, it's choice. So once somebody is compelled to use something or do something, so whether it's substances or behaviors, whatever they're doing or using is a compulsion and they have negative consequences for it, that's when we're looking at addiction. And life is all about mitigating risk reward and making those decisions, right? Like if we never wanted to see another accident on the roadways, the speed limit would be 5 miles an hour. But
Right.
that's just not realistic, right? So we're constantly as humans trying to gauge like how far can we push it. And so I think we do that with a lot of different substances and behaviors. And it really comes down to that individual saying, okay, what is the risk? What is the reward? What am I using this for? I mean, to me, intention is very important. I used to speak a lot on college campuses, and the way I always looked at it was this: if you are drinking or using to feel better, like that's more of a safe zone. When we're using to stop feeling something or to
Hmm.
start feeling something, a lot of people with extensive trauma or, that are in bad environments very much struggle to feel alive. And so we can use different chemicals to induce that feeling of love or connection or, so we get into trouble when we're using it for coping mechanisms or to do something that we can't naturally do. And it's just important to be honest because most people are not addicts. They're just not. But a lot of people are right below that line, and that's kind of that sweet spot we're talking about. And one of the best things to do, if you're like, wow, okay, I'm not getting arrested, I'm not losing my license, I have a healthy relationship for the most part with my kids and my family, and I'm a little bit worried, I don't know, try and stop. Just be like, okay, I'm going to do, sober October, or I'm going to just give myself 3 weeks and see how do I do without this? And then just get really clear. What are your triggers? What are you looking for? How do you do? And it's a great place to just self gauge where you're at.
Awesome. I love that answer. I'm gonna clip that and play that for anyone who bothers me about my drinking, uh, because I make it a point, and sometimes it's to lose weight, because that is the one downside to the amount of calories I put in my body. Um, but I'll go 2-3 weeks without drinking, and I have no withdrawal symptoms or no problems. And I don't drink on. I'm divorced. I have my kids half the time. I don't drink 50% of the time. Right, like not a drop. So it's like
Nice.
I know my life, both drinking and sober. And I will say too, the alcohol for me, a lot of times for a little bit helps me actually focus, because it, instead of my brain thinking about 1,000 things, I know that alcohol, where, yeah, here it is. I know that it makes you dumber, but that actually kind of helps, because it's like, okay, I can only focus on one thing. If I think about one other thing, I can't do this. So it kind of actually helps me, especially if I'm like trying to write. Kind of helps me. Now there's diminishing returns real quick,
Right.
but for like okay, I need to take 2 hours. I'm just gonna pour myself a big glass of whiskey, and write, and that's it. Kind of just fogs out the rest of my brain, which I know for many people would be a bad thing, but just the way my brain works, it's like it to me, it's almost like people who take an Adderall to concentrate. It again diminishes a lot faster the returns,
Yeah.
but um and also I did always say I had this conversation with my younger sister who's a big Jets fan. So she often would say, I drink after they win because I want to celebrate, or I drink after they lose because I'm sad. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Drink because you want to drink. You should never
Right.
drink because of an emotion. The only time I maybe question that is I sometimes just am bored. So I'm like, drinking will make anything I do more exciting. So
Yeah, boredom is a huge trigger that I don't think we talk about enough.
yeah,
It is a real skill to be able to just sit with yourself and not be entertained. And I mean, if we're going to talk about addictions and we're looking at social media and technology and porn and all these things that cause such massive dopamine dumps, like our hedonic set point is pretty high, and that's something we do need to all be mindful of. I was just listening to this great podcast with Dan Bilzerian, and he's talking about this moment where he's on a 350-foot yacht and there's 40 supermodels trying to fuck him, and all this is happening. And he's like, and I was bored. There is a point where we can have so much of good things and heightened experiences that we really bring ourselves out of balance. And so that's what I love about what you said. I don't drink 50% of the time, because that really becomes the goal, is who are you in both of those experiences, when you're out at the game having a few drinks with your friends and then when you're alone. And if you can really know yourself and be happy and find pleasure in simple moments, whether you're sober, having a cocktail, like that's really the key. We want to be good no matter where we are.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I maybe I guess just with me individually is being alone with yourself is really I so over a decade ago when my ex-wife left, you know, and those were nights where I was drinking to just drown sorrow, right? And I also was desperate for company, just anyone to be around. And as I've gotten older, it's like, no, the nights alone are kind of important to just make sure everything is stable.
Yes. Yeah, and you really don't know until you're in the ring. I mean, I used to own a martial arts school, and it's a great analogy. You can sit there and train and hit pads all day long. But until you actually climb in the ring and somebody's hitting back, you don't really get to put those skills to use. And so boredom or loneliness, those are two great catalysts to like really gauge who you are, where you're at, when we're under a lot of stress. Like, who are you then? And so to be able to just say, no, I'm going to sit with myself, I'm going to stay with myself, is really important. And, from a dating aspect or a future partner aspect, it's the same idea that you don't want to go to the grocery store when you're starving, because you're just going to throw anything in the cart. It's like, until you get good at being alone, probably not a good time to date, because you will compromise your standards. You will absolutely take what you can get rather than what you want, what you deserve. So it's really, really important that we be able to do that.
Yeah. How much with the couple of different things you do with the intimacy and then obviously the addiction, how much do those things uh, come into play? Because I feel like addictions can be the root cause for a lot of people's intimacy problems. Like, you're addicted to gambling, or again, even more innocuous things. You're addicted to exercise, so you're more concerned about keeping your body looking good than your partner's needs. Um, so I feel like that would come into play kind of a hand in hand
Yeah, I think especially for a lot of men, it's the addiction to performing, and it's work related and it is financial. And again, we talk about diminishing returns, right? Because what a beautiful thing. I'm going to go to work and I'm going to provide this beautiful life for my family. And that's the way I show love. That's the way I show up. That's where I get my cup filled as far as my worth. And I really do believe men need tasks, like 100%, like when we look at mental health and problems with a lot of males, especially younger at this point, men need to achieve things. That's literally how they feel valuable. So I'm not taking away from that. And there needs to be balance, because what I see a lot is, again, I'm going into the boardroom. I'm the man. I'm handling all this shit. I'm making the money. I'm bringing it in. And then those skills don't translate well at home. Like
Right.
your wife is not your employee. And also there's only a limited amount of energy and resources that we can either take in or extend out on any given day. Like we just don't have this unlimited capacity of energy. So if I'm focused all of my attention in one area, then it's going to really impact the other. And a lot of the couples that I work with, the main issue is the woman just wants to be paid attention to. It's like,
Right.
sit down, have coffee, and let her talk for 5-10 minutes, And even that alone sometimes is all somebody really needs, is just make me the priority for a little bit of the day. Now, when we get into other addictions, it's much more detrimental. Like if somebody is on substances, I mean, you cannot be in a healthy partnership with somebody that is using at that level 100%. So that's not even a conversation worth going into. We all know what that looks like. We've either seen it with our friends or we've experienced it firsthand, or with our parents, with ourselves. But it is those kind of addictions that are not bad enough, where there needs to be an absolute intervention, that can sometimes be the most toxic. And it goes both ways. Like I work with some couples where the woman, it's like, yeah, it's just like 4 glasses of wine every night, but then, just kind of naggy and bitchy. And then you're removed and you're not present. I mean, when we're talking about intimacy and we're talking about connection, if I am doing something that takes me out of myself, I cannot be present. I cannot connect to my partner. I cannot, be there in a real meaningful way. And so, when we look at substances addictions, we can go, yeah, the thing that happened is the trauma. They were yelling, they were screaming, they cheated, there was an affair, whatever. But with a lot of addictions, it's what doesn't happen. There's not these explosive moments, but it's like, yeah, you're just not here with me.
Right.
And it's those moments of intimacy. And I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about, like, I see you, you matter. I'm checking in with you. I am attuning to you. And that's not happening. And that creates havoc. It just does.
Yeah. No, I can, that makes a ton of sense. And if, kind of on a related note, that's always I probably shouldn't even go here, but but I feel like, and maybe it does relate to the men having kind of a task oriented brain, like you mentioned. As I know, my problems in relationships with women is they will complain about some problem, and what do I try to do? Oh, do this, try to fix the problem. They're like, they don't want me to fix the problem. They want me to listen to their problem. Um,
That's it.
that's I do, some of me thinks like, maybe that's just the way, not all men and women obviously, but a stereotypical male brain thinks like, well, I got to solve the problem. And a woman's like, no, I want to talk about my feelings, not about, it's not a thing on a to-do list to check off. It says how I feel about something. Um, I don't know that there's a way around that. I don't know that that totally relates. It's just what came into my head.
It's such an important dynamic, though, and it is a stalemate for so many couples. So I'm really glad that you brought it up and just addressed it. And again, it's awareness. That is 90% of all of this, is just going, wow, okay, she's talking, I want to fix it, and then just honoring that as a great part of you as well. Like, I love that about men. I think that's awesome. That's, one of your greatest traits, is you want to solve and step in and fix and protect, and by all means, yes, please. And it's being discerning and knowing when to just go, wow, that just sounds really hard, and you just don't try to make it better, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I have not mastered that awareness at all. I am
But you
far from that.
you can ask, right? Like, do you want help solving this or do you just want me to listen? Like, why not just ask? And then that person can go, actually, yeah, what do you think I should do? Or, no, I'd really just love for you to listen to me. Just
Yeah.
straight up ask.
That's well, there's a new strategy for me. See, I host this show just to help me. Uh Getting the whole spotlight off of me, probably not for long, let's face it. Anyone who's watched the show before knows. But I want to talk about one thing I want to highlight more is on this show is people who have overcome their own adversity. Um and and you obviously have a story with that. So it's interesting. I mean, I'll kind of tee it off, and then I'll let you go ahead and go with it. But you were a model for Playboy, um, partying with celebrities. Sounds like, and it probably was a glamorous life that, I mean, a lot of people would, I think, be like, yeah, I want to be that. Um, and I'm sure it was enjoyable for some or all of the time. But I know obviously it led to mental health, alcohol problems. I think it was. Well, you tell me. I don't need to tell you your story.
Yeah, I mean, I can really paint just one picture for you that sort of sums it up. And sure, there were moments that it was exciting. Towards the tail end of it, though, I'm living in Newport Beach in this beautiful house near the water. I'm dating one of the Chargers. I had just been at Half's 80th birthday party, at the mansion. I had just shot for FHM magazine, and so on the surface, it would seem as if things were going well, and I wake up on the floor of my condo. I have no idea what day it is. I don't know what time it is. I hate myself. I never hated my body as much as I did back then. You would go, oh, well, you're in magazines or you're doing this stuff for Playboy. You must have felt really confident. And it was actually the exact opposite. Because just think about it, being a woman walking around, and if you're in any kind of comparison, right, with just average normal people, that's one experience. But like, no, you're in a room with the most beautiful women in the world, and somebody is literally going, "Oh yeah, no, she's way hotter than you. I want her, not her." I mean, it was mind-blowingly difficult. And then, using drugs to keep my weight down. It was just absolute chaos towards the end. So I wake up, I don't know what time it is. I don't know what's happening. Shit. Sorry, somebody just came to the door. And the bottom line was this: I knew I needed to get sober, and I didn't know how. I didn't know how to get sober. I didn't know what that would look like. I was never in denial. I was never one of those people that was like, oh, I don't really have a problem. I
Right.
knew I had a problem, but it was just Rumi. Sorry, my dog is just going crazy. Hey, come here. I knew I had a problem and I didn't know what to do about it. And so that was the first time I went to rehab. And it was in some ways helpful. It kept me alive. Rehab was okay. It was very expensive. I went to one of those really bougie treatment centers in Southern California that costs $100,000. And basically, I did AA there, which is supposed to be free, So I would go to meetings, but it kept me alive. I mean, I was truly suicidal, and just I could not pull myself out. So going to treatment was great in a lot of ways, that it gave me that pause. It got me out of that lifestyle long enough to realize too that I could not go back. I couldn't work in that industry anymore. And I knew I needed to leave and like completely change my life. So that's what I did. That's when I left. I went to grad school. I decided I would actually become somebody that helped people get better. And I did stay sober for a while, but I started drinking again, and it was that exact story that you hear of, like, when you are truly an alcoholic, that first drink, you're right back in it. And that was true for me. And that was so terrifying to feel like I'm never going to be okay. And I really have a lot of compassion for people that are in that place. And what I will say is this, is that healing is typically not linear. And a lot of times, especially when somebody relapses, and there's an important distinction between a relapse and a slip. A slip is, I stopped this thing for a while, oops, and then I did it again, and I quickly course corrected and I'm back on track. A relapse is, I've had some time away and now I'm back in it, you know? And when we relapse, it's very easy to go back into that despair and hopelessness. So I want to say, for anybody that's dealing with that, just know you don't lose that time. You know, that time is always with you. It's always there. And the most important thing is to get back. I am very fortunate. One thing that I do not feel is regret ever about anything, because I can genuinely know that every single moment I did the best I could with the skills that I had at the time. I mean, I'm not somebody that should have ever been in the adult industry. Like, I was on a scholarship. I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I actually, during college, co-hosted a segment on NBC affiliate at 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Like, my career should have launched. I had every advantage. And, you know, through a series of choices, it's like the frog that jumps in boiling water jumps right out. And for me, just getting heated up degree by degree, you start compromising your values, you start making decisions that don't align with what you really want in life, and then the shame from that, it was this unbelievable spiral. But I look and I go, yeah, I know why I landed there, and I'm grateful for those experiences. I really am, because even my time in the adult industry, what a gift as an addiction expert to be able to talk about what is happening. And, you know, when we look at porn and intimacy and relationships, I mean, that is one of the biggest reasons that people divorce. You've got money, and then you've got online, whether it's porn, affairs, anything that's happening. And so I do feel fortunate that I had that experience, that I know what that industry is. I've been there and I have that firsthand knowledge. So yeah, it was a difficult thing, but I will say I haven't drank in 12 years. I don't miss it. I never think like, oh God, I wish I could drink. Like, it is really, really possible to truly leave something behind. And my biggest fear when I was getting sober was that I would be one of those people, and I'm not meaning to talk shit right now, but like sitting in a room just trying not to drink. Like, the white knuckling of something never worked for me. I will just straight up admit I am not strong enough. My willpower is not strong enough. If I was still craving alcohol, I would be drinking, because I couldn't will myself to not do it. So it's just important to know that true healing can happen, because for me, it's again, I've never wanted it one time ever since.
Well, that's awesome, because yeah, I always I guess that's an interesting thing too, is that's something I again have had discussions with people about, but I don't really have insight into it. Is I said, you know, if there was a point where I needed to give up drinking, I couldn't. I mean, I guess this is where that shift in healing happens. Is it's like, see, I couldn't go to there are certain things. So a good example, I mentioned I took my son to New Orleans. We went to a Saints game. He's 11, so we weren't staying in the party part of town. We were staying outside of the city. We came in for the game. We go in before the gates open. We go into what's called Champion Square, and the only thing they're really selling there is beer. Now, so I had a beer. You know, in the morning, it was like, you know, 9:30 a.m. So a little early, but regardless, I wasn't, you know, I had one beer, but that was the moment where it's like, I, even if I gave up drinking, I'd want to be able to just have this one beer, because this moment, it, first of all, I was thirsty, and they were not selling anything but beer. They did have liquor, but they didn't have water or soda. Um, and it's like, see, I'd want that moment of drinking that. It just helped me enjoy the atmosphere. One beer, I mean, I'm a very large guy. One beer, and I drink a lot, so one beer is not going to do anything to me
Sure.
mentally or get me drunk. But it's like I like that feeling. There's certain, I guess there are certain moments that maybe get stupidly romanticized, where it's like, well, this is only, I have to be able to drink a beer here, or I'm at this party and everyone else is drinking, I've got to have a couple. Like, and I guess that's where the flip side is, I don't think anyone notices or cares that other someone's not drinking. I think in
Right.
my head, that's what always goes on. People would be like, what's that weirdo doing not drinking beer with us right now? And it's like, I don't think anyone ever actually thinks that, but that's where my head goes.
Yeah, people are never thinking about us for the most part. Everybody is just, little narcissists running around just thinking about themselves. And we're thinking about other people thinking about us, and they're not thinking about us.
Right.
But I love that you brought up the nostalgia and the ritual, because when we look at quitting any addiction, I mean, cigarettes are a great example of this, and it's so challenging because every morning I wake up and I have my coffee and my cigarette, and we have these associations and patterns. And when you think about different substances and dopamine, remember, dopamine is the motivation chemical. Serotonin is the satiation. So dopamine is the go chase that pleasure thing. And so we have strong associations between the beer at the game, or the cigarette in the morning, or the whatever it is. I'm going to walk into the casino and actually feel like the man for once in my life. I know what that's going to feel like. And our brain releases all these chemicals that attach us to that outcome and give us the motivation. So there's cravings, there's so much going on in the brain. And I think it's important to just like acknowledge that, and again go, what is the consequence? There was no negative consequence to that. You went, you had a beer, you watched the game, you're having a great life, like, good, there you go. It is challenging. Again, when does that line, when do you hit it for somebody, right? And do we need to get the DUI? Do we need to get the divorce? Do we need to? It's this idea of bringing the bottom up. And I think that just takes a lot of honest introspection, and then also the courage, like I said, to change our behavior. And it's not easy, and it's much easier to just continue doing what we have always done and dealing with the consequences, however big or small. I mean, it's that idea of homeostasis. An organism wants to stay in what is familiar, even if it's in dysfunction. We really just are primed to resist change. But I think it's courageous. I think it's beautiful when people go, who am I without that? And then just find out. And then again, the goal is to be a choice. Let me be a choice with this.
Yeah, that to me, that makes me happier than the idea of, not that it matters what makes me happy, but the idea of someone like you said, this is how I always visualize, like, if I gave up alcohol, I would be white knuckling it sometimes. Like, oh, I really wish I could have this beer at the ball game, or whatever. Um, but when you frame it that way, that it's just, I have, it's a choice and I have no desire anymore for it, that makes me happier than there's got to be, is there, well, this maybe ties into the psychedelic discussion, because I want to touch on that too. But well, I guess I'll straight up ask, is that for the alcoholic who slips into it, or again relapses, and just crashes, and they know that will happen if they just take that first drink, um, but they really want that drink? Is psychedelic something that can help that person? Is that a tool? So I mean, again, I'm gonna sound like an idiot here, but my only experience with psychedelics is like, take them to enjoy walking in the woods more. Like,
Yeah,
so.
beautiful. No, and it's a great question. I'm really, really grateful that at least we have progressed a little bit with our relationship with psychedelics when used therapeutically. We have some incredible studies and literature showing how effective they can be for addiction. Specifically, if we're looking at opiates, we've got the medicine iboga or ibogaine that has amazing, amazing results for many, many people. When I think about general psychedelic use helping in that situation, like I relapsed, I'm drinking a lot, what I believe the value is working through whatever the root trauma is, right? Because when we're using at an addicted level, there is a tremendous amount of pain buried. And what's fascinating about the opiate crisis is it can hit anybody. And if you take opiates long enough, you will become addicted to them, right? So there doesn't necessarily need to be some deep root cause where we used to just look at anybody that was drinking or using a lot or whatever, escaping something. Yeah, there was this deep trauma wound, right? But especially with opiates, you can be living a pretty damn good life and then start taking those, and then they are just so, the rapid tolerance that develops, the amount of pain you're in when you don't have it, they can really snag anyone, even somebody that has pretty solid mental health and good coping skills. Just the physical addiction of those can take you out. But what I want to say is, if I'm using to mask some deep trauma, then absolutely psychedelic therapy can help. And the way it works is, if I'm just in talk therapy with you, I can tell you, if I'm honest and willing to be vulnerable and I trust you enough, I can tell you about the thing that hurt me. And that can be immensely helpful. A lot of times, people can go through hellacious things. We're actually very resilient as long as there is an appropriate, attentive, compassionate witness. We can move through that. We can heal, we move on with our lives. We don't have crippling PTSD reminders. We're not, ruined by the experience. So having a compassionate witness, even in talk therapy, is exceptionally valuable. And sometimes the things that are keeping us stuck are really unconscious, or they are buried so deep in our psyche. That is where psychedelics can be exceptionally useful. And then you take a medication like MDMA, which is going to flood the person with feel-good feelings. Now I can re-imprint a new emotional memory on this experience, because when we look at PTSD and I remember, what happened, my body is reliving it, right? So if I was a soldier in war, I hear a loud noise, it's like my body is back in that chaos. So we need to remember that the positive is also true. When we compare a positive association with a memory, then the body is almost re-experiencing that. So if I can process my trauma and I'm flooded with feel-good emotions and I feel safe and I'm loving and nurturing myself as I move through this, I am re-imprinting that new memory and I am releasing that trauma and I am holding myself with compassion and love. And that's, to me, the brilliance of it, is it can expose some deeper layers and then also allow us to really shift the energy around that emotion. But that's done setting, you need to be so safe with it, have somebody that knows what they're doing, be with a trained professional. And, that's when we're talking psychedelic therapy. And that's also not to say that I don't think it can be exceptionally useful for what you said as well. Eat a few mushrooms and go be in nature. I mean, that is a ceremony in and of itself. I would just say be very mindful, know your psyche, know how you do, have a trained professional before exploring that alone is probably
Yeah.
a wise move. But I do think there's value in that experience as well.
Yeah, I think that's the I think that's the misconception a lot of people have, by the way, with when they talk about psychedelics or MDMA or anything, is that it's like, no, they're not saying just take them at home by yourself. Like that's not, that's
No.
that, well, and I know my friends who had mushrooms were cautious about giving them to me for a while, which is like, well, they must be good friends because they're like,
Yeah.
you need to be in a controlled setting, like, and people need to know what you're doing so that they don't take you down a dark path because they can turn on you in a bad way if you're, so let everyone know so that, so I again, I'm appreciative of them babysitting me through my drug using experience, but
No, it's beautiful, and it is really important. I mean, anybody with, a family history of schizophrenia, or, real serious mental health issues, high doses of psychedelics are not therapeutic for everybody. There are people that can actually be very detrimental for. What I am a huge proponent of, in many cases, is microdosing. And that is something that can be exceptionally beneficial with very, very minimal risk, especially when we're looking at psilocybin. Most of my clients are microdosing, and that helps in the talk therapy and coaching that we do. And it's a great alternative for anybody that is looking at antidepressants or any kind of pharmaceutical. I would highly encourage, check and see how this works. It turns on the neural circuits in the brain differently. It opens up those doors of perception. It can elevate mood. Again, it is not for everyone. Anybody that says, oh, do this one thing and it's going to fix you. I mean, that's the lie that the pharmaceutical industry has been telling us forever. Here, take this pill and then you'll be happy. Well, if that were true, we'd all be on it. You know what I mean?
right.
And it's also not to say that there isn't a time and place for medication. Absolutely. That is an individual choice, and anything that enhances your quality of life, truly, like, I love and support you on your journey. I just feel the conversation around microdosing deserves more merit, because if you can take this thing that is natural, that just grows in the ground with very, very minimal side effects, why not explore and see how useful that is?
Right. There's still a stigma. I mean, I guess that's my problem with so many things in this world is so many people uh judge things based on, well, misinformation. I mean, I guess that goes back to like reefer madness, right? Like,
Yes.
it's silly how obsessed some people are with what other people do, and they're usually not. A lot of times they're the people who could benefit the most from, like like you like that's a scary. See, that's where my brain goes. That's a scary addictive behavior I notice with some people is they're obsessed, they're addicted to judging other people. Like, it's it's like never introspective, it's always looking outwards and judging. um do you face I mean, do you face any of I'm trying to think of the best way of saying it. You probably know where I'm going, but do you have people who are like, come on, look at you, you are a Playboy model, you're not, we can't take you seriously? Again, people who are just judging based on, I mean, there are probably people probably that don't go to you for help, but there are probably people out here there who would say, oh, Playboy, oh, gross. Like, so
I'm
I'm guessing you've dealt with that a little bit in life, if not maybe professionally.
You know what's so fascinating is I kept that part of my life so hidden for so long. So, when I finished graduate school, I got sober, started working at the university, and I got this teaching position. I actually I changed my name because I was so worried that anybody would find out about my past. And that's a very real thing. I'm going to go and I'm going to teach 18-year-old young men. And then if they knew, they could see me naked. That would never work. The
Right.
university would fire me, and I would deserve that 100%. So I hid it lock and key. And I was also really smart. When I worked in that industry, I didn't want to get famous. I didn't want anyone to know. And I knew this is temporary. I want to make a lot of money and then I want to get out. And
Right.
I changed my name. I use different aliases every shoot. Like you would be hard pressed to find my stuff. So I hid it forever. So I was a university professor. Nobody knew my past. And then my ex-husband and I owned a large martial arts school. I taught our kids program. So again, that whole time I'm like, Jesus, just please don't let anybody find out, because people are weird about sex. And I am not ashamed of what I did. I wouldn't do it again. Like, trust me, I could have an OnlyFans right now and make a lot more money than I do. That's just not who I am anymore. But I don't shame myself for being that person. The only reason I talk about this so openly now is when I got divorced, that was the first thing my ex-husband did, is just blasted it, told everybody all my stuff. And you know what's crazy though? He did me the biggest favor ever, because you know how many people cared? Zero. As a matter of fact, everyone's like, oh my God, that's crazy. I would have never guessed. I can't believe you've lived so many lives. Like, people were really intrigued by it. Now, granted, I'm sure a lot of people think I am just this awful person. They just didn't tell me. I'm sure there is a subsect of people. But for me, the fallout was zero. So here I kept this secret, like, please don't let anyone find out. And then everyone finds out and nothing happened. It goes to our conversation earlier when you're like, everyone's thinking about me. And no, they're not. So that actually was one of the greatest keys to freedom for me. And I didn't have to worry about it anymore. But yeah, I think that, that decision, again, everything we do has a consequence, whether positive or negative. And to this day, I'm sure it has cost me a lot of clients and jobs and everything else along the way. And that's just something that I have to deal with. And it's also given me a lot of flavor and introduced me to a lot of different people. And it's been a unique part of my story. So it's one of the things, it's the both and.
Yeah, I mean, to me, hopefully it's also done the reverse as far as brought people to you, because it, even just having you as a guest on the show, it's like, you're more interesting to me because you've lived, again, that life that when I was, weird segue, but I was showing, uh I was taking a couple guys. We're going to be doing a feature film in St. Petersburg where I live, and I was taking them to some locations for filming. And I was telling them stories, and they all involved drugs, booze, sex, all of the stories. And I'm like, those were the best days of my life. Those were the greatest. And so that, to me, it's like, see, I would have a hard time taking someone seriously who didn't touch, or, like, I've said before, I have a hard time finding a therapist because I realize quickly I'm being performative and keeping things from them. Like,
Right.
I don't want to tell her that I did cocaine because then she might think I'm a dirty scumbag, and I don't, like little things like that. And that's the moment when like, I'm gonna withhold that information. That's when it clicks in my head. I need a different therapist I'm more comfortable with.
Yes.
Um, so to me, that's always my thing. Is I guess I always envision a lot of people who work in this line of work, like my mother, who's never done a drug a day in her life, doesn't cuss, so me and my brother insist she probably didn't even have sex with our father. It just kind of happened. Um, but she did not have anyone before him. She makes that very clear. So it's like going to her, it's like she hasn't lived my life.
Right.
She doesn't have my, we can call them vices, whether or not, you know, that's maybe a debatable word to use, but I'm like, I want someone who at least understands the allure of the vices that I have, not someone who's like, I've never done a drug in my life. I've never gotten drunk in my life. I haven't said the F word since I was 13 years old. It's like, I don't think we're the same.
Yeah, exactly. There is a relatability factor, and I think it does go to that judgment as well. And so that is one of my gifts. And I think a lot of us that have been through so much, not to say that we don't judge at all, but it's like there's probably nothing you could say that I haven't either done or that would surprise me. And some of my favorite people are the people that have been through the most and then found their way out. That is way more interesting to me than somebody that's just always had it together. I like grit, you know? I like people that like challenges, that have been through things, that have lived different lives, that have a lot of different dimensions and textures to their personality, to their sexuality, to all of it. It's like, but then again, who are you now? What did you do with those experiences? Somebody that can really integrate and embody all of those things and has hit the full spectrum of life. Yeah, like, okay, let me learn from you.
Yeah. Well, I had a fascination, and I had a few on my podcast of ex athletes, because my
Mm,
fascination with them was, it's like you have a clock on your career, whether
yeah.
it's, and sometimes your ability is your clock. Like that could be you're 25 and you're still in the minor leagues. You need to come up with a new thing. Or you played in the majors, but now you're doing something else. You made it. You made millions of dollars, sure, but you still have most of your life to live. So I had a fascination with that. And then I did realize, kind of somewhat recently, like models are in the exact same boat. Like there's a shelf life, you know. I'm sure there are things, whether it's drugs or plastic surgery, that can extend that life. But nonetheless, I don't, it's just, it's a sad state, but like you said, they're going to say, we're going to take the hot young one over someone who's not 20 years old anymore. So it might be a shorter shelf life than professional sports, honestly. But it's the same thing. It's fascinating. Like, it's the exact same thing. Is okay. You're done with that part of your life. As much money or success as you made doesn't matter. The fact is, you've got to do something for the rest of your life. Like, it doesn't matter if you have $100 million or $100 in your bank account when you're done with that journey. I mean, I guess, it makes a little difference, but you
Yeah.
still need to do something. I guess if you have 100 million, you can run a charity for the rest of your life and be fine. Uh, but so that's always the second act, I guess, is maybe the best way of saying it, is what are you doing now, because you've got hopefully you've got the majority of your life still ahead of you, and you can't just sit around and say, you know what I used to do.
Right. God, and what a nightmare to go, my entire self-worth is my beauty or my athletic talent or these things, like you said, that really do have a shelf life on them. And I think that it's just so important when we're getting all this external validation and accolades, is like filling our own cup, knowing that our own self-worth comes from more than that, because that's where the transition is going to be smooth. Okay, I'll appreciate my gifts and talents, but I know that they are not what defines me, and I have so much more to offer the world. I dated a guy that was a very famous wide receiver in the NFL right as he had transitioned out, and it was fascinating to watch that process. I've also dated pro athletes when it was like, oh, they went from this small team, then now they're on the Yankees, so even within teams there is, this rise and fall, or oh, I'm back in AAA and up, and there's something that's just so amazing to watch the people that do it well. Same thing with a woman, like in the modeling industry, all this and that, right? What is my next move? I mean, Pam Anderson comes to mind. I think she's rad. She's like rolling up to the red carpet now, no makeup. Like, okay, my whole life was just, I'm hot. What else am I? And she went and found out. And I think it's great. And it's the people that like play with life. They're not like,
Yeah.
oh, woe is me. I don't play football anymore. Or, I'm not posing nude anymore or whatever. They're the ones that, like, that's so fun just to watch people like just pivot. Yep, I'm going to go in this direction and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the people who do the pivot and do it well, they're fascinating to me. And yeah, I love to hear the stories. Uh, Joe, so we're going to wrap up our episode here, but not until you tell the audience where they should go to find more of you.
So I'm active on Instagram. Joe Weatherford is my handle. And then my website, joeweatherford.com or recoveryremix.com. It will take you to the same website. But any questions, anybody has anything they want to discuss, wants free resources, anything, like please never hesitate to reach out. Happy to support in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much. This has been a really fun conversation, and the time has flown. Thank you, audience, for watching this episode of Scratch My Noodle. Come back next week, or if you're streaming it, just keep letting it play, and the next episode should come on. I don't know how streaming works. See you next episode.